All right, so we are going to be working on solving absolute value inequalities. So, if you remember the stuff that we just did, where actually not just, but let me go back to the absolute value equations. This is section 2.1c. So, in section 2.1c, do you guys remember how, like, when we had an absolute value equation, we had to write two different equations, one that looked almost identical, so you can see example 2 here, v minus 2 equals 0, kind of looks just like the original problem, right, but without the absolute value signs. But then we would change the sign of the number, so instead of a 0, we would put negative 0, which obviously doesn't mean anything different. And then we were supposed to flip the equal sign, right? But that doesn't look any different either, right? But you're supposed to flip the symbol and change the sign of the number. That's what you do when you solve absolute value equations. And you can see me do it again right here, where at first I just wrote 10n plus 8 equals 62. And then the right side equation, I wrote 10n plus 8. I flipped the equal sign, which still looks like an equal sign. And then instead of a positive 62, I wrote negative 62. Okay? Today's lesson is basically this. The only difference is now, instead of equal signs, we're going to have symbols that say less than, or greater than, or less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So that means I get to flip it. Okay? I will get to flip that one and see it flipped. Other than that, it's the same exact problem. Okay? The same exact problem. The graphs are going to be lines kind of like what we've been doing. So you'll see it. Okay? So we've done what we're about to do. You do have prior knowledge to it. Give me a second. You do have prior knowledge to it, so that's good. That means you have a little bit of an advantage. But it's going to be a little different near the end. Okay? So let me start off with something that I guess we could say on the simpler side. Okay, so we're going to solve and graph. Oops. Excuse me. Hold on. I got to restart the program really quick because it's not letting me change colors of the pen, and usually that just needs to be started up again. So solve and graph. So the first one we're going to do is going to look like this. B over 10 inside of the absolute value is less than or equal to 2. Now I do want to remind you guys, remember the rules about if it points to the left, it's an and if it points to the right, it's an or. Remember how we talked about that? So left is an and, right is an or. The rules still apply here. So that means when I graph it, this problem should have two lines coming towards each other. Okay? It should be crashing towards each other. All right? If not, then it could be no solution, but in most cases we did something wrong. Okay, they should be kind of going towards each other because this is pointing to the left. This is an and problem. Okay, so I'll kind of write that over here. I'm just going to put and. All right, so let's do the work here. When we did absolute value equations, we had to break it up into two equations. So here's the first one. B over 10 is less than or equal to 2. So that's done. Okay, B over 10 is less than or equal to 2. Now, my other one is B over 10 is greater than or equal to. Remember, I got to switch the symbol, and then I got to switch the sign on the number, so minus 2. Okay? So you switch the symbol, you switch the sign. All right, let's get to it here. What do I do to solve for B on the left side problem? What do I do with that 10 on the bottom? Right now it's dividing by 10. Multiply, right? If you ever don't know, ask yourself, what is it doing? That way you can say, well, do the opposite, right? If it's adding, then subtract. If it's subtracting, then add. If it's dividing, multiply. If it's multiplying, then divide, right? So we're going to multiply. So B is less than or equal to 20. All right, good, we're done. Now let's do the other side. We're going to take the same step. We're going to multiply. So if I multiply 10 times negative 2, that's negative 20. Awesome. I'm finished. Now I got to graph this. Okay? So let's graph this thing. I'm going to be drawing my own graphs here. You guys are going to have to draw your own graphs sometimes. Sometimes they'll give them to you guys within the problem. I'm going to make a pretty big one. Now, just so you guys know, again, you can draw these however you want. I'm going to go by fives, okay? So let's say this is 0, 5, 10. That's probably too much. I probably should have gone by 10. But yeah, I'm going to go by 10, or else I got to redraw everything. So 10, 20, 30, negative 10, negative 20, negative 30. The first graph, b less than or equal to 20, tells me I should have a solid dot. It goes this way, okay, less than or equal to less than left, right? Less than left. Make that connection. If it sounds like an L, you're going to go left. So less than is left. The other one says b greater than or equal to negative 20. So negative 20 greater than or equal to, it's a solid dot. And I go this way. Now I want to stop really quick and just make a real quick mention on this. And I don't know if anybody here did it, but I know I saw it in other classes for sure. A lot of you guys, when you did your graphs for the test, you stopped right here. And you left that as your answer. But this is an and problem. You can't just leave it like that. You got to tell me, what do they have in common, right? What do they have in common? So I'm just highlighting it for you here. You had to draw the line that connects the two. Okay, you can't just leave it as two lines going in the same direction, well, towards each other. You have to tell me, like, what do they have in common? Their conjunction, basically. So that is a correct answer for this problem, the red one. Okay, the other two are good. Those are called guidelines, but the red one is my actual solution. All right. So you might notice that on your test, maybe I put, like, with my pen, I like highlighted and just kind of drew it for you, or just kind of, maybe some people, like, I would say, I would put like, this isn't good and this isn't good, like it's not supposed to be there, right? So you might see some X marks, just basically saying like that stuff shouldn't be there, and then I would kind of draw your other stuff out. If you're not sure what you missed, ask me, I can tell you. But for the most part, try to mark where things went wrong. So are we okay with this one? So again, we've done this before. Okay, we've done the whole absolute value thing, so that shouldn't be new. And the graphing, we literally just did it, right? So all this is previous knowledge. Remember, math builds upon itself. That's why it's very important that you practice it, right? When you were younger, they wanted you to do homework and try it and do it and do it. Why? Because if you don't practice it, you just forget it, right? So summer is a perfect example of that happening. Every time you go to summer and you don't do any math homework or anything like that, you start finding out that you can't remember what you did anymore, right? So, all right, let me give you another one here. Absolute value of x plus 10 is greater than or equal to 0. Did I tell you guys the analogy that math is a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Have I told you guys that? So one of my professors in college basically told me that. They're like, math is like one of the only subjects that you have to pay attention to, like a significant other, a wife, a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. Said, because if you don't, it's gonna leave you, just like your wife, your boyfriend, your husband, right? Math needs you to pay attention to it. If you don't, it's gonna go away, right? Trust me, if you have someone right now that you're in love with, don't talk to them for 2 weeks. Let's see how that goes, right? Ghost them, right? Next thing you know, they're not gonna be there, just like math, right? It's not gonna be there. If you don't practice it, if you don't study it, it's not gonna stick around, all right? So, and my professor told me that, I'm like, that's so true. Now, you don't have to go get your math book and sleep with it next to your bed. That's okay. You don't need to do that. But you should pay attention to it daily. Like, literally just read these notes. Just look through them and say, okay, I remember. Right? Oh, I remember that. Right? Just do it daily. It doesn't take long. All right, let's set this one up right here. Absolute value of x plus 10 is greater than or equal to 1. So we're going to write two equations, right? Because it's an absolute value. X plus 10 greater than or equal to 1. And the next one, x plus 10. What do I write next? Say it. Well, the negative 1, I heard that. What do I do with the sign, though? Instead of greater than or equal to, flip it, right? Less than or equal to. Let me change the color on that, just so that it's a little more obvious. Okay, you got to do that. Have to do it. Now, I'm just curious, is this an and or an or problem from the very beginning? Or, right? It's pointing to the right side, so I'm going to put or. So I'm expecting these to go in opposite directions, but remember, sometimes they go same direction, and that's okay. But I'm expecting them to go in opposite directions. So let's go ahead and solve. We're going to subtract 10 on both sides. So x is greater than or equal to negative 9. So that one's done. And then for the other one, we're going to do the same thing. Subtract 10 on both sides. So you get x less than or equal to negative 11. So let's draw this. All right, so we'll put 10 here in the middle. I'm sorry, negative 10 in the middle. Negative 9, negative 8, negative 11, negative 12. All right, so let's draw the first one. X greater than or equal to negative 9. Okay, greater than or equal to negative 9. So solid dot. Which direction am I going? To the right. Okay, since the x value is on the left side, then follow the arrows, right? If it was on the other side, then go the opposite way. The other one says x less than or equal to negative 11. So I'm going to go negative 11. Solid dot. Which way? To the left. Less than or equal to, less is left. And there you go. You're done. There's your answer. Notice this is very much like what we just did. I'm repeating it. Math builds on itself. You can't forget what you've learned and then go and learn something different. It's not like history. I'm not trying to make fun of history, but history goes in sections, right? You learn about the Civil War. You learn about the Vietnam War. You learn about World War II, right? You learn a lot of different things, and they're all categorized. Now, yes, they are connected because of history, but you can learn about the Gulf War without ever knowing about the Civil War and still understand war, right? Math is not like that. You kind of have to know stuff before, right? So sciences are like that. Chemistry, biology, physics, math, they're all like that. So I think that's why people hate them so much, because they're like, man, if I don't keep studying it, I'm going to forget it. I don't like this, right? So I'm guessing that's why. Now, just so you guys know, there's only 8 problems in your homework. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one more example. That way at least you got 5 to do. But I'm going to do the hardest one that I see on your homework, okay? So it looks like this. The rest of them actually look a lot easier, and I mean a lot easier. For some reason, all of a sudden, this problem popped up. And it looks like really tough. It's not terrible, but it looks really tough. As you guys are writing it down, I want to just give you guys a real quick, kind of like a warning, sort of. You see how right now it's pointing to the right side, the little arrow? So we would say, well, it's an or problem. Never figure out if it's and or unless only an absolute value is left. So I got to clean out the whole left side first. And then once I clean it all up, and it just says absolute value of 6 plus x, at that point, then I say and or. But never do it now, because maybe I have to divide by a negative number as I'm solving for the absolute value, and that's going to flip things around. Okay? So don't just jump to like or for sure. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. 50-50, right? There's only 2 options, and or. So make sure you kind of do the work first before you decide and or. You'll notice the other 2 that we did, I'm going to go up really quick. These were already solved for your absolute value, right? Absolute value of x plus 10 is greater than or equal to 1. It's done for you, so you can make that decision. Same with this one. It was already solved for us, right? Absolute value of b over 10. There's nothing else in front of it. This one has a lot of stuff, so we got to fix it first. So let's get rid of that 3. So we'll subtract 3. So I get 7. Absolute value of 6 plus x is greater than 14. Now, never distribute into an absolute value. Okay, never do that. Ever, ever, ever. Parentheses, sure. Okay, parentheses you can distribute into. You can distribute into brackets. Okay, so in other words, if it looks like this, go ahead and distribute. That's fine. If it looks like this, oops, sorry, should be bracket. You can go ahead and distribute. If it looks like this, that's just another form of a parenthesis. That's called a brace. So a parenthesis, a bracket, and a brace. You can do all those, but never, ever do this. Okay? All right? Never distribute into an absolute value. All right? So if I can't distribute the 7 into the absolute value, what can I do with it? What is it doing to the absolute value? Ask yourself that question. Yeah, you were gonna say, yeah, it's currently multiplying, and I did hear you say divide it. Yeah, it's currently saying 7 times that, right? So the opposite would be division, right? So by the way, when you said subtracting, that's usually what most people think. They're like, oh, it's just a positive 7. Let me subtract it, right? But you got always ask yourself, what is it doing? If it's multiplying, then do the opposite, right? So we're going to divide it out. So divide it out by 7. So I get absolute value of 6 plus x is greater than 2. Now, notice how my problem is now solved for the absolute value. Now I can make a call. So is this an and or an or problem? Yeah, it is or. Okay? It is an or problem because it's pointing to the right. So that means my graph should be going in opposite directions, but maybe they go towards each other, but hopefully opposite directions. So let's go ahead and solve this. 6 plus x is greater than 2. The first one's always easy to write. The next one, we're going to have to switch things around. 6 plus x is less than negative 2. At that point, solve each piece, and then you're pretty much done, and then you got a graph. So let's subtract by 6. So we get x greater than negative 4. That's one answer. And then we'll subtract by 6 on the other side. We get x less than negative 8. So draw a picture, and you're done. Okay? So let me draw a picture real quick. Ooh, this thing's slanting. All right, so I'll go by 4s just to kind of keep it a little easier here. So I'll do negative, I'll put 0, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, negative 10. Some of the problems, 4 of them already have a graph for you, 4 do not. So some of them you're going to have to graph them. Some of them will already have a graph for you. All right, x greater than 4. Okay, greater than, not greater than or equal to, greater than. That means my circle has to be empty, okay? It can't be solid. So at negative 4, I'm going to put an empty circle. And greater than does not mean left. G doesn't sound like L, right? Greater means to the right. All right, x less than negative 8, less than left, right? So I'm going to go negative 8, open circle, to the right. And there's your answer. All right, so you guys have 8 problems for homework. I just did 3 of them, so it's a pretty short assignment. That's why I'm not doing a whole bunch of them. Okay.